Okay.
Just to give viewers also a perspective of what's changed, since the time, the AGR due case has been happening. Fundraise of around 18,000 crore was done, covered, that almost converted the debt of around 53,000 odd crores. 3 rounds of tariff hikes happened, first in 2019, then 2021, then 2024. Overall, what investors, that are, and this is a retail favorite counter, right? What they're trying to seek is that Indian government provides a package covering all liabilities of Vodafone Idea. If you take a look at the overall dues, government dues of around 1,99,000 crore related to deferred spectrum and AGR liability, of which spectrum debt is over 1,21,000 odd crores, and AGR dues of around 77,500 odd crores. Plus, there are upcoming payments as well, right? You have your AGR payment obligation of around 16,400 crore of FY26 installments, spectrum dues of around 2,600, bank debt of around 1,700 odd crores, and in FY26, Vodafone Idea could generate a cash EBITDA of around 10,000 crores versus the payment obligation of around 20,760 crores. So that's the kind of wideness that's there between the payment and the
to add to this, the other aspect we need to consider is, as Soumit had put this in spotlight earlier, was the kind of savings that Vodafone will see. Actually, in totality, you're not seeing more than 450, 500 odd crores. From a financial perspective, if you see that the amount that a Vodafone Idea will actually save on this, but from a sentimental perspective as well, this does come in as a major relief. I mean, you took us through, the upcoming payments that we're looking at. In fact, if we talk about FY26 as a whole itself, Vodafone Idea, they are saying, could generate an EBITDA of nearly around 10,000 crores versus a payment obligation of 20,760 odd crores. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I do have Soumit who's mic'd up, and probably he'll be able to give us some light on this. Soumit, before I come to you on this, the stock continues to see an uptick of around 10%. Now, the government has allowed, the Supreme Court has allowed the government to reconcile all of Vodafone Idea dues, and this actually gives them some bit of a relief. What would you have to add to this?
Well, it's a big relief that has actually come in for Vodafone Idea if it materializes going forward. Because right now what Supreme Court has said here is that they will have to that the government will have to consider and recalculate the entire AGR dues for any miscalculations that were done. So the entire AGR due amount that stands in the balance sheet of Vodafone Idea at this moment is close to 77 to 78,000 crore rupees, and the payment for the same starts by the end of this financial year, that is FY26. So by the end of this financial year, the company had to pay close to 16,000 crore rupees to the government for the AGR dues, which is way higher than the cash EBITDA that the company generates. So it was quite impossible for the company to pay up this amount to the government. And if there is a recalculation that happens for this amount, then then the actual amount due to the government could come in much lower than what the current amount is at around 78,000 crore rupees. So that's a big relief coming in if it materializes going forward. But as of now, what we know is that the Supreme Court has asked the government, and what will be the relief, or what type of what amount of the relief would come in actually for Vodafone Idea is still not clear. But do remember this couple of numbers. Firstly, the total AGR amount on the books is close to 77,500 crore rupees, and the amount that the company needs to pay annually to the government is 16,500 crore rupees. So any amount lower than that would be a big trigger or a big positive that could happen for Vodafone Idea, and indirectly Indus Towers also benefits from them because it gets nearly 1/3 of its revenue from Vodafone Idea. So if Vodafone Idea's financial health improves, that indirectly benefits Indus Towers also.
For that, let's pull up Indus Towers as well, because absolutely that stock is also reacting on the back of this positive news, that development that has happened. There you go, 4%, a spike coming in there. In fact, we have Nisha Podar as well, who's in the studio. Nisha, you've been tracking the space pretty closely, right? I mean, Soumit did get us all the financial aspects of it in terms of what happens once the hearing is over, or, in terms of dues, how much do they save?
Yes.
But from a sentimental perspective and a development perspective, how are you looking at it?
It is a game-changing move for Vodafone Idea. It can actually help it in the worst situation of the operations as well as the financial plague on Vodafone Idea, because while the understanding from the order was that only additional AGR relief is going to be given, with Supreme Court's amendment and the clarification that the relief for Vodafone Idea by the government can be on the entire AGR due, issue means that the entire 77,000 crore rupees can be up for discussion with the government, and that is a huge relief and a game-changing move for Vodafone Idea. And also remember that any financial investor coming into Vodafone Idea, which is critical at this point for the company to raise funds and to take the business forward, because remember, the government wants 3 players at least in the telecom sector, and with Voda Idea really dying, it is not helping the sector, especially in front of the competition of big boys like Bharti Airtel and Jio. So therefore, it is a very, very important move and a very big relief for Vodafone Idea, even in attracting financial investors, which it really wants at this time, because the government has 49% stake.
Absolutely, and you've put all of that into context very well. But we've got Mahesh Uppal, telecom expert, joining in at this moment as well to tell us what he thinks about this development. It's, as Nisha has just pointed out, could be a game changer. Mahesh, do you agree with that? And what, according to you, are the key aspects to focus on? First of all, the numbers as you see it.
Yeah, I think it is a game changer. I do believe that this is the right approach to what Vodafone has been going through. I do believe also that it is good for the sector, because clearly we want a competitive telecom sector. And fourth, Vodafone itself has over 20 crore customers, and by most measures, its network or its quality or its speed is no better or worse than any other. And I think India needs infrastructure, India needs competition. And I think all this will be greatly helped by what the Supreme Court has done, because eventually government will now have some free hand to decide how to deal with Vodafone. And you can imagine how it would deal with this, because it's itself a 49% equity holder in the company. So I think it's by and large good for Vodafone, good for the government, good for the consumers, and good for India's telecom networks and telecom sector.
Stay with us. In fact, we have Piyush Pandey also who's joining in. Piyush, it's interesting to see this development, because you have the Supreme Court, which is allowing the government to reconcile all of Vodafone Idea dues. And they've amended their previous order as well in the AGR case due. Now, this morning itself, we were talking about, a TGH who was in talks to invest almost $6 billion in Vodafone Idea as per news reports. And they had mentioned that the investment will happen only if the Indian government provides a package covering all the liabilities of Vodafone Idea. If you have to put, 1 plus 1 together, what would this combination actually mean for you when you're tracking this space pretty closely?
I think with this recent clarification, now government has more freedom to reduce these AGR dues. So as of now, it is expected that government can remove or cut down this interest and penalty on this AGR part, and that can remove that that can reduce total debt by roughly 50,000 crores. So that will be, I think, welcomed by this additional investor, who are probably looking for a substantial relief in the AGR dues matter like that.
The question that arises is that we're still talking about thousands of crores of debt, and you've just suggested maybe penalties, but then could a write-off be on the cards? Could an adjustment of the debt be on the cards? It's not something that the government has been allowed to do, and that is why this is so significant. So what is the route that you see this taking? What is the way in which that debt can be adjusted?
See, as of now, I think it would be too early to comment, but I think it is probable that government might just ask them to pay the principal part of AGR dues, and interest and penalty can be waived off, and that can provide substantial relief to Vodafone. And maybe it can cut down the total debt from 2 lakh crore to roughly close to, say, 1.5 to 1.6 lakh crore. And this is where when additional investor can pitch in and then that can take care of these capex programs for Vodafone Idea.
So Piyush, you think that $4 to $6 billion of investments would be enough, and for how long will it sustain Vodafone Idea, and will it be able to limp back into the competition with strong competitors like Bharti Airtel and Jio?
I think currently the gap between Vodafone and its bigger peers remains huge. And this cash infusion, if it happens, it can take care of capex of roughly next 2 to 3 years. And that is when I think the network capabilities of Vodafone can improve. And one I think positive indication can be that if customer churn completely disappears for Vodafone Idea, if that happens, I think that can be one positive indication. But as of now, I think it will be difficult even with this capex to just get at par with Bharti or like the Reliance Jio.
What was that last thing you said, Piyush? What disappears for Vodafone Idea?
Customer churn, yeah. Customer
churn. Okay.
Yeah. So they are losing roughly 2 to 3 million customers per quarter. So maybe if they continue with the capex program, see they might start adding customers, but it is I think too fast currently. Yeah.
Stay with us, Piyush. Mahesh, I want to talk to you about the investments that we are looking at. TGH, who's in talks to invest around $6 billion in Vodafone. Nisha just took that question with Piyush as well. But if you have to look at the investment, you're talking about the capex. And in FY26, the estimation is that Vodafone could generate an EBITDA of around 10,000 odd crores versus a payment obligation of nearly 20 to 21,000 odd crores. Even if you do all the math right now where, probably there could be a write-off, hypothetical write-off that could be coming in so far, what would you advise to do with a Vodafone? Do you think it still could be out of the woods, number one? Because to get to a Bharti Airtel or a Jio is a wish they have right now. Mahesh, are you with us?
No, I missed you. I missed your question. I'm so sorry.
Okay. My question to you was that, they're sitting on a cash generation of around 10,000 odd crores that's estimated for FY26. They have an obligation of around 20 to 21,000 odd crores. Even if there is a write-off in terms of the dues, their wish to actually get back to where they were earlier is a long and a tall ask. What is it that will be needed to actually be within that competition league of 3 players?
Well, clearly, the most important thing that they need currently is investment. And once that eases up for them, given the Supreme Court judgment, the rest certainly would be a little easier. Having said that, it's clear that telecom gives a huge advantage to incumbents. So clearly, whether it's Jio or Airtel, they have a huge advantage over Vodafone. So clearly Vodafone has an uphill task. Having said that, it's also important to recognize that the nature of the business, the telecom business, is that it is a vanilla business. And I think when you're competing in a vanilla business, which is not as brand driven as, let's say, a pair of jeans is, then you have much more flexibility in terms of how you acquire market share. So I do believe that depending on how they do their marketing, how they price their services, etc., it's not inconceivable that they will regain some, if not all, of that market share.
Okay, Piyush, one last quick question. With regards to where, the investors are concerned, there's a lot of retail interest in this counter. Somebody who's bought at elevated levels for this counter, what should he or she do right now?
So my view is that I think there is a lot of uncertainty. And if somebody wants to play a telecom space, it's better to go with Bharti Airtel or say even Indus-Towers. Even Indus-Towers can be a beneficiary of in relief to Vodafone Idea. So those two are, I would say, better players, profit-making company, growing company. And for Vodafone, I would say I think there is huge element of risk associated with it. And it is better to wait for some clarity regarding the amount of relief, clarity regarding the new investor coming in. And if everything happens to settle in place, then you can see a good amount of upside, which can last for quite some time. But till now, it is better to wait and let some clarity settle in. Yeah?
Is one to watch. Mahesh Uppal and Piyush Pandey, thank you so much for joining us and for making sense of this breaking news situation. And I'm sure that we are going to be talking about this story not just over the next few hours, but also in the coming days as we see more developments come.